Hi, welcome to Bone Boot Camp and a little session on desensitizing, or this is really part one of desensitizing when you have some nagging issues. Oftentimes it's low back pain for many of us or hip pain. Sometimes it's also shoulder pain, particularly in postmenopausal women. And what we don't want to do is have the twinges of tightness or pain start narrowing our range of motion. We start doing less and less and less. And then, as is the case with shoulders, you end up with frozen shoulder. In other ways, you end up not going after strengthening that which is weak, and things only deteriorate from there. So the idea is let's desensitize our nervous system and get moving again. So how do we do that? Well, one of my suggestions comes from a lot of the work of Eric Franklin, who uses imagery. So just join me in today's exploration, and I will continue throughout the next few um, videos to share with you part 2 and part 3 of desensitizing and moving on. So today is tuning in. So let's just, as we're standing here, think about the fact that our pelvis and our sacrum on the back of our pelvis, that triangular bone, they are really our center of gravity. So we move from here. If you think about walking, this is the place where we move from. Let's stand and just feel your body. So for a lot of you, this will probably mean having soft eyes. So letting your eyes just take in less light, take in less of the surroundings around you so that you can really focus internally on feeling your body stacked. So can you feel your pelvis pretty much over your heels? So I don't even want you to look, just feel it and breathe. And can you feel that your rib cage is pretty much stacked over your pelvis and that your head is pretty much stacked on top there, on top of your shoulders, which are over your rib cage, which is over your hips, which are over your feet. And as you check in with this, can you think about how your pelvic floor might feel? Because it's housed inside this center of gravity. So it's really important. So let's just hold on a moment and see if we can sense our pelvic floor sitting there in that bowl. And that might be kind of hard. Let's try some imagery. Let's rub our hands together. Rub, rub, rub. Get a lot of rubbing going. And I know you've probably seen this parlor trick before. After you've rubbed quite a bit, you just hold your hands apart a teeny bit and you feel that energy. You can feel almost a hum. You can feel the heat. Yeah. So just notice it, believe in it, and think about there would be this similar energy in your pelvic floor. And I know this is really hard to tune into, but we just imagine and you think about how when you walk, you're creating some of that energy, and maybe we can feel the pelvic floor. So let's take a walk around. Now, my screen prevents me from walking around the whole house, but if you can, that's a great idea. And it doesn't have to be just forward walking in circles. You can walk forward and back and side to side, or a little grapevine is good too. And I'm thinking about the energy that's housed in there as I walk, that there is energy, and maybe I can sense it, maybe not. Not to worry if you don't. And we'll stand still again, and we'll just think about our breath and the fact that we have a breathing diaphragm, that when we inhale, it descends, it pushes on our abdominal contents, and our pelvic floor descends with it. And when we exhale, pelvic floor comes up, and so does the breathing diaphragm, pushing the air back out. So we've created a bunch of energy by walking and moving a little bit, and now we're just going to sense if we can feel that energy a little bit more with some more imagery. So we inhale, and the breathing diaphragm drops, pushing into the contents, and the bottom of the pelvic floor or pelvic bowl drops. We rebound like a trampoline, and both little trampolines come up. So now we see the inhale is the air lightly jumping on those trampolines, and then the air rebounding back out on the exhale. So we inhale, and it's not a hard jump on the trampoline, it's a light pressing and a rebounding back up. So there's almost like two floating objects, and that object is the air as you breathe. And maybe you can sense your pelvic floor just a little bit with that exhale. And if not, no big deal. We let that go. And we're just going to now think about energy flowing up and down. So your sacrum, this triangular bone back here, is this center of gravity place where the top of your body rests on top of it, and you've got the limbs that move below it. And this pelvic area that has the sacrum is what really receives the energy coming up from the ground when you walk. There's actually a term for it, ground reaction force. So it's not some woo-woo energy idea. It is really truly biomechanics and physics, that the energy rebounds from gravity down through you walking on the earth and rebounding back up into your body. That's what actually creates hip loading when you're walking and wanting to build bone. So if you think about this movement, there's a ground reaction force that's coming up. Let's translate that into you as a human body. And imagine you're just like an oak tree, and you've got strong, strong, strong roots filled with steel, just strong, strong roots. And here are the roots all planted. What's up above that allows a tree to move? Well, if the steel is everywhere, then there's not a lot of movement, and you can see how restrictive that could be. So even though it's super strong with these steel legs, so to speak, there's little ability to do much and feel much, except for maybe some recurring pain when everything's all locked down. So let's instead use some imagery to imagine that ground reaction force idea. We're going to take it into imagining our legs are just rivers of energy. So flowy rivers. Imagine a river. Imagine things floating on the river. Well, we've got vertical rivers, two of them, flowing up your legs and meeting at the pelvis. And the pelvis is this transfer spot for energy. And it's how we end up getting this nice walking rhythm. Let's see that energy flowing. So it's no longer rigid, like firm roots into the ground. Really energetic, and feel the energy of these rivers as fluid support for your pelvis on top. So imagine being able to move with that energy. See the rivers, see the floating, see that your pelvis is floating, receiving that energy. And now, rather than rigid movement, you feel more of the ability to sway and to move and to respond. And maybe if we think of our legs this way and we start walking again, we might even feel, even in this moment, a little more fluidity in how we walk. You've got a really strong river. The river is flowing, but it's also really, really powerful. And that powerful ground reaction force propels you forward, builds your muscle mass, builds your bone mass, and allows you to propel yourself through life. So let's take that and just think about how everything feels in this body that we've got all stacked up. And I'm going to ask you to take one hand to your shoulder. We're going to imagine that up here at your shoulder is a big sponge, and we're going to squeeze. And this isn't going to be quick. We're going to take our time, and we're going to squeeze maybe the upper arm the back of the upper arm, the back of the shoulder, and it's a sponge, and the water that has flown up from the river is now just dripping down off your hand. So each time I squeeze, I envision a flowing water drip. You can squeeze up your neck, squeeze the top of your shoulder blades. You can push your fingers in for a little pushing into the sponge. But remember, it's a sponge. You can grip more with your thumb. We're just gripping and squeezing the water out. It's just flowing and dripping down my hand. Keep squeezing. Squeeze everywhere that you can find a little meat to squeeze. And just see the sponge and see the water dripping, dripping, dripping down. Maybe even dripping down your leg. And then pause for a moment. And I'm closing my eyes. You don't have to, but what do you feel? Does your right hand feel like it's hanging lower than your left? Maybe it is. Does your right foot feel more grounded into the earth? Mine does. No matter how many times I do this exercise, I get this entire connection to the earth that is more grounded on the side that I did the sponge exercise on. So let's even that out. Let's come to the other side. And we're squeezing again, seeing that sponge. I sort of let my hand act like it really does have water dripping out of it. Squeezing and squeezing, and it might even drip into my rib cage. Just creating more release of that water that's flown up my legs from the walking, that energy that flew upwards. It's all just flowing energy. And I'm squeezing it, squeezing the sponge, getting all the energy to release. Maybe you can feel some sensations in your arm. Maybe it's tingly, maybe there's heat, maybe it's just some feeling of energy. Finding all the places. Almost done. And indeed, my left foot now feels more connected to the ground, which is amazing because I didn't massage my foot. But it is all connected, and we are all connected. And there's this warm flow that happens, and now we can walk around and maybe feel better balanced, more graceful, more secure, more confident. And this is actually a first step. I know I started out talking about something like low back pain, and I actually had some this morning and was still feeling it when I came to record this. And to be honest with you, I don't notice it right now. So sometimes imagery really can help us tune into our body and not be flooded by the nervous system's excitement about something that might not be the happiest in the world. Maybe we can find a better place to move from. And I want to show you in another way how sometimes the rigidity can be released with imagery. So here's another idea. We've oftentimes talked about finding range of motion and being able to lift our arms overhead and keeping our ribs down. And sometimes we get super rigid with ourselves in trying to make all this happen. And we get really over-focused on what's going on up here. So I'm just going to throw out an idea. And we're going to look at how we might be able to still do that Still do the raising up of our arms and even feel that clutch purse that I've talked about before for having that active armpit to lat connection so that we're staying out of our neck when we bring our arms up. So let's just try that once. Let's externally rotate our upper arm. Feel like you have two clutch purses under your armpits. You want to keep that clutch purse connection as you try to bring your arms up. And I'm just going to let you see where I am right now. And that feels like a boundary for me, or my spine or my ribs or my neck are going to get involved. So I'm going to shake things out, and I'm going to imagine that my arms are balloons. So I've got little balloon fingers, balloon hand, balloon forearm, balloon humerus, upper arms. And I am going to just, maybe, do you know what? Let's take one arm down and let's just do one side. So I am moving my arms as if I was having some light exercise, but this is light, 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 light. They're balloons. It's not heavy. It's not hard work. I've got floating balloons here. So these floating balloons are moving around and floating and holding my arms up. And I'm not feeling the tension I might otherwise feel when I do some little arm exercises. The floating balloon is keeping my arm up so I can rotate it and play with it. I don't feel tired yet. The floating balloon is really helping me move around. Keep thinking about that floating balloon just holding you up here. Move in all kinds of ways. And reverse. And then coming down. Once again, my right hand feels longer than my left, but I didn't fatigue all that much. So I just feel the difference. And now I'll let the floating balloon come up again. And I start moving. Floating balloons. I feel that support, almost as if there's a big balloon right there. So there's no tension in my shoulder blade or my neck to hold my arm up. I've got all kinds of support. My fingers are floating. Everything has support, and I'm just moving. The balloons are working their magic, keeping me afloat here. And I can even internally and externally rotate because I'm resting on these floating balloons. So it's not that hard. I can come up and down and forward and back and circles. Just feeling as if my arm is floating and happy. And coming down. So I feel both my arms feeling alive and warm and really good. And then I'm going to take these floating balloons and do the exact same exercise. So here I am with internally rotated arms. I'm going to turn my elbow pits forward, which bring my palms forward, but it also externally rotates my upper arm, which is my idea. So once again, finding that external rotation, grabbing two clutch purses, one under each armpit, continuing to breathe as I bring my arms up, looking for how much room I have to bring my straight arms up without my spine or my rib cage changing. And I found a little more range of motion. So that's not a parlor trick or a party trick. It's not magic. It's finding ease by tuning into our body and using imagery to do it. So that's a starting point. We didn't completely attack the whole idea of what's going on in the low back, and I'll get to that next week. So tune back in for part 2 of desensitizing and tuning in.